Beyond drugs and alcohol, anxiety is possibly the most significant factor that can restrict your ability to remember accurately. This has many real-life implications for witnesses of violent crimes, or even for stressy students frantically trying to recall what they've learned for an exam. Stress and anxiety are well known for negatively impacting performance, and performance in complex cognitive tasks, like memory, are noticeably affected by heightened levels of stress and anxiety. Johnson and Scott wanted to demonstrate the effect of a weapon, pretty high stress, on an eyewitness's ability to accurately recall a scene. Participants sitting in a waiting room overheard an argument in the room next door. At the end of the argument, a man ran through the waiting room holding a pen covered in grease, pretty low anxiety inducing, or a knife covered in blood, the freak out, big panic, there's been a murder, high anxiety condition. The researchers hypothesized that the presence of the knife would increase witness anxiety levels and therefore adversely impact their ability to identify the man carrying the knife later on. They called this particular anxiety the weapon focus effect. When a high anxiety source, such as a weapon, is present, this distracts witnesses from other, less stress-inducing information, like faces. The study's findings support the predictions, with only 33% of participants correctly identifying the man in the high anxiety weapon-carrying condition, compared to 49% in the low anxiety greasy pen condition. Worth noting that neither condition returned a majority of correct identifications, which supports the wider criticism of eyewitness reliability in general. Elizabeth Loftus wouldn't be surprised. Speaking of, Loftus et al. Back up Johnson and Scott's weapon focus effect theory with a study tracking witnesses' eye movements, and found that people focus their attention on high-stress stimuli, such as a weapon, and away from other things that seem less critical to keep an eye on in a high-stress situation. It makes adaptive sense to focus on the thing that could do you in, rather than admiring your potential assailant's fashion sense or noting that they choose to put peanut butter on their crumpet instead of jam. Some things just feel a tad trivial when there's a weapon in play. However, the research isn't entirely unanimous, because there is also a school of thought that points out increased levels of stress and anxiety can actually enhance performance. It's why performers embrace their nerves. A little bit of anxiety sharpens the mind and primes the body for an enhanced performance. So say Christiansen and Hübinette, who interviewed 58 real-life witnesses to a real-life bank robbery in Sweden. Incidentally, one of the happiest countries in the world. Some of the witnesses were direct victims of the robbery. They worked for the bank and were the focus of the robbers' attention. High stress. Others were customers and bystanders who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Low anxiety. Who had the better recall? Well, on average, all witnesses demonstrated a pretty good memory of the situation, with about 75% accuracy. Note that this outperforms results achieved in artificial laboratory studies, and therefore casts doubt over the validity of laboratory studies into eyewitness testimony. There was, however, a distinction in recall abilities between the two naturally occurring groups, victims and observers. And it was the high anxiety group of victims who were able to recall best. To settle this apparent contradiction between studies, let's zoom out and consider Deffenbacher's meta-analysis of 21 studies of the effects of anxiety on eyewitness memory. Well, the research really splits a room, with 10 studies suggesting increased arousal leads to a greater recall and 11 studies saying the total opposite. Deffenbacher's attempt to square the circle with this mixed bag of results is to point attention to the Yerkes-Dodson effect, a bell curve which, when plotted on a graph, shows that some level of increased anxiety will enhance performance, but extreme levels of anxiety will have a negative effect. With that in mind, I hope you found this a moderately stressful video. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. If you did, give it a thumbs up and share it with a friend. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to Psychology Unlocked and click that bell. That way you won't miss out on any of our upcoming videos. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time.